Imagine this: you stop responding. You stop chasing. You stop bending over backward for someone who doesn't prioritize you. And suddenly, everything changes. Suddenly, he reacts. Suddenly, he notices. And if you've ever wondered why a man reacts strongly when you stop contacting him, it's not magic. It's psychology. And today, I'm going to share 5 secrets from psychology that will help you command respect, make people value your presence, and understand human behavior like never before. Think about this for a moment. How often have you noticed that when someone becomes less available, suddenly, people start paying attention? You know what I'm talking about. That person you barely notice when they're always around, the one whose messages you sometimes ignore because, well, they're just always there. They suddenly become magnetic when they step back. You see them less. Their responses take a little longer. Their presence becomes rare. And immediately, your mind starts working overtime. You start thinking about them more, noticing details you hadn't before, feeling the pull of curiosity, even a little anxiety, because they are no longer instantly accessible. This is not coincidence. This is psychology. This is human nature at its rawest, most instinctive level. Scarcity triggers attention because human brains are wired to recognize value through availability. When something becomes less available, the brain interprets it as more valuable. It's basic, primal, and it applies to people just as much as it does to objects, opportunities, or experiences. Consider the dynamics of relationships for a moment. When someone is constantly present, constantly messaging, constantly agreeing to plans, constantly accommodating, the brain begins to take that presence for granted. It adapts to it. The constant availability lowers perceived value because the human mind assumes that whatever is always there is easily replaceable. When a person suddenly steps back, boundaries are introduced, and scarcity appears, the brain reacts by increasing attention, focus, and desire. It's as if the brain is saying, "Whoa, I can't take this for granted anymore. I need to pay attention, because this is rare, and rare things are precious." This is why someone will react so strongly when you stop contacting them or when you start prioritizing yourself over constant communication. The scarcity creates a void, and the human mind instinctively wants to fill that void. It's important to understand that scarcity is not manipulation. This is not about playing games or being intentionally aloof. Scarcity becomes effective when it is rooted in self-respect and boundaries. When you create space for yourself, you're signaling, without words, that your time, energy, and attention are valuable. You're showing that your presence is not automatic or guaranteed. This, in turn, naturally compels others to recognize your worth. It's a subtle shift in perception, and it works because people cannot ignore something they feel could be lost. The fear of losing access to something rare or valuable is a powerful motivator. It's built into the human psyche. People respond to scarcity because it triggers their attention and activates a heightened sense of importance. Think about the way marketers use scarcity to sell products. Limited editions, one-time offers, exclusive deals. These techniques are effective because scarcity triggers urgency. When something is rare, humans are wired to act faster, value it more, and engage more intensely. Relationships operate on the same principle. When someone becomes less available, when they stop overextending themselves for validation, suddenly their presence feels precious, even if it wasn't before. It's not about ignoring someone to make them chase you, it's about valuing yourself enough to create natural boundaries, which inherently generates respect and attention. The psychological mechanism behind this is fascinating. The human brain is constantly scanning for rewards and threats. When someone is always accessible, the brain categorizes them as a predictable reward, almost a baseline expectation. Predictable rewards do not trigger strong emotional responses because the brain says, "I can get this anytime." But when access to that reward is restricted, the brain experiences a sense of novelty and even mild tension. Scarcity creates a gap between expectation and reality, and the brain responds by focusing more intensely, analyzing every action, every word, every opportunity to reconnect. That's why when you stop responding immediately or you reduce the frequency of contact, someone may react strongly, they're not overreacting emotionally. Their brain is hardwired to notice what has become rare. Scarcity also taps into the human need for significance. We naturally gravitate toward people who are not easily obtainable because our minds associate rarity with value and importance. The less someone is available, the more their presence becomes a signal of worth. People subconsciously think, if they can choose when and how to engage, they must be valuable. This perception alone can elevate your status in someone else's mind, creating admiration, attention, and, most importantly, respect. Scarcity communicates power in a way that constant availability never can. It says you have a life, priorities, and self-respect that are not contingent on someone else's immediate approval or attention. What's even more compelling is how scarcity encourages reflection. When someone is always present, it's easy to overlook them. Their qualities, their personality, their efforts become background noise. But when they step back, suddenly you start noticing the little things. The thoughtfulness in their messages, the way they make you laugh, the moments you share. Absence highlights value because it creates contrast. Scarcity gives people the opportunity to reflect on what they might be losing or what they may have taken for granted. And reflection is powerful because it leads to conscious awareness of appreciation and, often, a stronger emotional response. Scarcity works even more effectively when paired with authenticity. It's not about withholding attention to manipulate emotions, it's about intentionally respecting your own needs and boundaries. When you honor your own time, space, and priorities, scarcity naturally occurs. You're not being cold or distant, you're being whole and intentional. People are drawn to wholeness. They are drawn to individuals who live according to their own standards, not merely in reaction to external pressures. And the more authentic the scarcity is, the more it reflects genuine self-respect, the more powerful the psychological impact becomes. In practical terms, scarcity can manifest in small but meaningful ways. It could mean taking time to focus on your personal growth instead of responding immediately to every message. It could mean prioritizing your own schedule and interests before dropping everything for someone else. It could mean setting clear boundaries about availability and communication without guilt or apology. These actions, subtle though they may seem, have profound effects on how others perceive your value. Scarcity is not about creating distance for its own sake. It is about creating an environment where your presence is genuinely recognized, respected, and valued. Ultimately, scarcity triggers attention because it aligns with fundamental human instincts. Our brains are designed to notice what is rare, to focus on what might be lost, and to assign higher value to what is not guaranteed. When you step back, when you honor your own needs and create healthy boundaries, you tap into a powerful psychological force. You shift the dynamics of attention and perception in a way that naturally generates respect, admiration, and focus. People respond strongly not because you are distant in a negative way, but because your scarcity reveals your worth, signals your independence, and activates the brain's instinctual recognition of value. Confidence is one of those things that people immediately notice, whether you realize it or not. It's not about arrogance or loud self-promotion, and it's certainly not about needing approval from anyone else. Confidence is quiet. Confidence is knowing who you are, understanding your value, and carrying yourself with a sense of assurance that doesn't demand validation. Think about the people you naturally respect. The ones whose opinions carry weight without them having to shout, the ones whose presence commands attention simply because they exist with self-assuredness. That is the power of confidence. When a man reacts strongly when you stop contacting him, part of the reason is that your confidence signals independence, strength, and self-respect, all qualities that naturally trigger psychological responses rooted in admiration and intrigue. Confidence communicates something fundamental, that you are enough. You don't need to constantly prove your worth through texts, calls, or attention. When you stop chasing, when you step back, and when you honor your own needs, it immediately signals that your self-worth is not tied to someone else's acknowledgement. This is a powerful message because humans are wired to respond to strength. We subconsciously respect people who hold their ground, who are anchored in their own sense of identity, and who operate from a place of self-reliance. Confidence is magnetic because it tells others that you are not dependent on them for validation, which, paradoxically, makes them want to engage with you more. Confidence is also visible in the small things. It's in the way you speak, the way you carry your body, and the choices you make about your time and energy. When you respond intentionally rather than reactively, people notice. When you choose when to engage and when to step back, it demonstrates that your attention is valuable. This is key to understanding why someone may react strongly when you stop contacting them. It's not just that they miss you, it's that they suddenly realize your presence is not guaranteed, and that awareness is intensified by the confidence you exude. You are demonstrating that you are not controlled by desire or expectation, you are in control of yourself. The psychology behind confidence is fascinating. Confidence reduces perceived vulnerability. People are naturally drawn to strength because it signals stability and competence. When someone sees you handling your life with assurance, making decisions without overthinking or apologizing, and maintaining your boundaries without guilt, it triggers admiration. The brain associates confidence with value, capability, and reliability. When you step back from constant communication, this admiration is amplified because your independence becomes undeniable. Confidence communicates to the other person, you are free to act, but my choices are my own, and that autonomy demands respect. Confidence also alters the way others interpret your actions. Someone who is unsure or constantly seeking approval may notice a delay in communication and immediately assume rejection, panic, or insecurity. But a confident person's absence is interpreted differently. It is interpreted as self-assured, deliberate, and intentional. The brain recognizes that someone operating from confidence is not acting out of desperation, they are acting from integrity, from clarity, and from a place of knowing their own worth. This is why confidence commands stronger reactions. When someone realizes they cannot predict or control you easily, their attention sharpens, and their respect grows, because uncertainty paired with strength triggers focus and emotional engagement. Confidence is deeply tied to self-respect. It is impossible to command respect from others without first respecting yourself. When you set limits on your time and energy, when you refuse to overextend for someone who does not reciprocate, when you make choices that prioritize your well-being, you are acting confidently. You are showing that your presence is a privilege, not a given. And the stronger and more consistent this behavior is, the more intense the reactions of others become. The moment you assert your boundaries with clarity and grace, people pay attention because they recognize that you are a person of value, someone who cannot be taken lightly or manipulated. Confidence is not just about outward behavior, it's about internal belief. It's the quiet understanding that you are whole on your own, that your happiness, validation, and success are not dependent on someone else. When this internal belief aligns with your external behavior, it creates a powerful synergy that others cannot ignore. People feel drawn to confidence because it represents security and stability. They may respond strongly when you stop contacting them because they sense that your self-worth is independent of them, and that realization challenges their assumptions about influence, control, and emotional dynamics. Confidence, in essence, shifts the power balance naturally, without force or manipulation, because it is grounded in authenticity. Another crucial aspect of confidence is emotional self-regulation. A confident person does not overreact to minor slights, delays, or uncertainties. They maintain composure and respond thoughtfully. This emotional steadiness reinforces respect because it demonstrates mastery over self, rather than being controlled by external circumstances or others' actions. When you stop contacting someone but maintain calm and clarity, it's not coldness, it's strength. It communicates that your decisions are intentional and that you are in command of your life. This control is magnetic and often provokes strong reactions because people instinctively notice strength paired with independence. Confidence also allows you to prioritize what truly matters without guilt. It empowers you to say no without fear of losing favor, to step away from draining interactions, and to focus on growth, passion, and purpose. When someone sees that you are not swayed by their presence or absence, they recognize that you operate on a different level of self-assurance. This recognition can elicit curiosity, admiration, and even a sense of urgency, because they perceive that you are someone of substance whose time and energy are not trivial. Confidence transforms scarcity into meaningful presence. When you are confident, stepping back does not create tension from neglect, it creates respect and attention because people sense the value of what is not freely given. Finally, confidence is amplified by consistency. The more consistently you carry yourself with self-assurance, the more people internalize it as truth. If your confidence wavers based on external validation, it becomes fragile and less impactful. But when your actions align with your internal belief system day after day, people naturally gravitate toward you with respect and focus. They notice patterns of strength, independence, and intentionality, and their reaction becomes one of recognition, admiration, and heightened attention. Confidence, when consistently embodied, is a force multiplier in relationships because it transforms perception from casual awareness to conscious respect. Humans are pattern-seeking creatures. From the moment we wake up, our brains are wired to notice routines, predict outcomes, and anticipate behaviors. It makes life easier, more comfortable, and less stressful. But when someone breaks the pattern, when someone introduces unpredictability, it triggers a very powerful psychological response: curiosity. Emotional unpredictability, in particular, has a profound effect on the people around us. When you stop contacting someone or change the usual flow of your interactions, it's not just silence or absence they are noticing, it's a break in their expected pattern. Their brain starts working overtime, trying to understand, analyze, and predict your next move. This creates attention, focus, and heightened interest because unpredictability naturally draws human curiosity. Think about it this way. If someone always behaves in the same way, always responds immediately, and always reacts predictably, the mind learns to take it for granted. The behavior becomes background noise. The brain categorizes it as expected and unremarkable, which diminishes perceived importance. But the moment that person does something unexpected, pauses before replying, chooses to focus on themselves, or simply disappears for a moment, the pattern is broken. The brain perceives something unusual, something significant. Unpredictability disrupts expectations, and humans instinctively pay attention to disruptions because our minds are designed to solve problems and decode anomalies. That's why emotional unpredictability creates such a strong reaction. It forces the mind to notice, evaluate, and engage in a way that constant predictability never does. When you stop contacting someone or reduce your availability, you introduce an element of unpredictability. People become curious because they are naturally driven to understand what changed, why it happened, and how they should respond. The unpredictability doesn't have to be dramatic, it can be subtle. A delayed message, a pause in routine conversations, or a conscious choice to prioritize yourself are enough to activate this curiosity. The effect is intensified if the person has previously experienced consistent access or predictable behavior from you. The contrast between the expected and the actual creates mental tension, and the brain works to resolve that tension by focusing on the person who has changed their behavior. Psychology explains this effect in terms of uncertainty and cognitive engagement. The brain perceives uncertainty as a puzzle that must be solved. When someone behaves unpredictably, it triggers increased attention, higher alertness, and even emotional arousal. The person experiencing your absence or change in behavior begins to analyze every interaction they had with you, looking for clues, patterns, or reasons for the change. Their mind replays past conversations, gestures, and shared experiences, all in an attempt to decode your motives. This heightened mental activity naturally creates deeper engagement, stronger emotional reactions, and, ultimately, increased respect because they recognize that your behavior is intentional, not accidental. Emotional unpredictability also amplifies the perception of value. When someone can rely on your attention at all times, your presence loses novelty and importance. But when your behavior introduces unpredictability, your presence becomes noticeable again. The human mind values what is not guaranteed because rare and unexpected experiences are naturally associated with significance and importance. By simply shifting your emotional patterns, stepping back, or acting in a way that is less immediately accessible, you create intrigue. People start to perceive you as more complex, more self-aware, and more interesting because they cannot fully predict or control your responses. This perception of depth directly translates into respect and attention. It's crucial to understand that emotional unpredictability is not about manipulation or creating confusion for selfish gain. True unpredictability comes from living authentically and setting boundaries. It comes from honoring your own emotions, focusing on your priorities, and refusing to overextend yourself merely to satisfy someone else's expectations. When you do this, the unpredictability is genuine, and it resonates differently with people. It creates curiosity without resentment. The brain responds to this kind of authenticity because it senses that the behavior is rooted in self-respect rather than deception or coercion. Unpredictability also taps into the emotional investment of others. Humans naturally invest more mental and emotional energy when outcomes are uncertain. Predictable behavior does not challenge them. It does not require reflection or analysis. But when someone they care about or are interested in behaves in an unpredictable way, their brain invests energy into decoding, predicting, and understanding. This investment is a form of engagement that builds psychological presence. People begin to notice the subtleties in your behavior, they remember the moments you were present, and they start valuing the interactions because they are no longer automatic, they are meaningful. Emotional unpredictability transforms ordinary presence into something notable and psychologically significant. The impact of unpredictability is intensified by contrast. People are most sensitive to deviations from what they have come to expect. If you have been consistently available, suddenly pausing or stepping back creates a stark contrast between past behavior and present behavior. This contrast draws attention and stimulates curiosity because the brain seeks to resolve the mismatch. Curiosity drives reflection, analysis, and even anticipation. The person may start wondering about your thoughts, your priorities, and your emotions. They may replay shared experiences to understand the shift, creating an internal dialogue about your value and significance. This is why even subtle shifts in availability or engagement can provoke strong responses. They challenge expectations and demand cognitive and emotional attention. Emotional unpredictability also encourages introspection in others. When someone notices a shift in your behavior, they are prompted to evaluate their own actions and interactions. Did they take you for granted? Did they assume your attention was guaranteed? Did they fail to appreciate moments when you were fully present? This self-reflection is powerful because it naturally enhances respect. People respect individuals who demonstrate self-awareness and intentionality because it signals maturity, autonomy, and psychological strength. Unpredictability, when paired with consistent self-respect, creates a magnetic dynamic where curiosity, reflection, and respect are all intertwined. Furthermore, unpredictability builds tension in a positive way. Humans are wired to respond to tension and anticipation with heightened engagement. When someone cannot predict your reactions, they become mentally and emotionally involved, thinking about possibilities and outcomes. This engagement is not superficial, it is deeply cognitive and emotional, and it reinforces your significance in their mind. By introducing unpredictability, even in small doses, you create a scenario where your presence and absence carry weight, where your attention and responses are meaningful, and where your value is recognized in a way that predictable behavior could never achieve. Ultimately, emotional unpredictability creates curiosity because it activates fundamental psychological mechanisms, the desire to understand, the need to solve puzzles, and the natural human response to novelty and contrast. When you step back, reduce availability, or behave in a way that is intentionally aligned with self-respect, you do more than generate attention, you provoke engagement, reflection, and admiration. People respond strongly because they are drawn into the complexity of your autonomy, the intentionality of your choices, and the value of your presence, all triggered by the simple yet profound power of unpredictability. Non-reactivity is one of the most powerful yet underrated aspects of human interaction. It is the ability to maintain calm, composure, and clarity in the face of emotional triggers, conflict, or provocation. It is the quiet strength that communicates control without force, confidence without arrogance, and influence without manipulation. When you stop contacting someone or step back in a relationship, the way you respond, or choose not to respond, speaks volumes. People notice when you do not react impulsively, and the psychological impact is profound. Non-reactivity increases your power because it shifts control of the interaction to you. It signals that you are not easily swayed, that your emotions are not dictated by others, and that your sense of self is intact, regardless of external circumstances. This creates respect, attention, and even a sense of intrigue because humans are wired to respond to emotional stability. Think about how often people react immediately to texts, calls, or situations with heightened emotion. In those moments, control is given away. The brain of the reactive person becomes consumed with the stimulus, flooded with hormones like adrenaline and cortisol, and decisions are made under pressure rather than clarity. Reactivity creates chaos and unpredictability within yourself, and others subconsciously notice it. Conversely, non-reactivity creates an aura of power. When you pause, observe, and respond deliberately, or even choose not to respond, you demonstrate that your inner state is not dependent on external events. This is magnetic because it signals that you are in control of your life and your emotions, which naturally compels others to respect your presence, your time, and your decisions. Non-reactivity is rooted in emotional intelligence. It is not about suppressing feelings or pretending to be indifferent. It is about recognizing your emotional responses, understanding them, and choosing actions that align with your long-term goals and self-respect. When someone tries to provoke you, either through passive-aggressive behavior, manipulative tactics, or simply by being difficult, your ability to remain composed communicates strength. People respond strongly because it challenges their assumptions. They expect emotional reactions, but when none come, it disrupts their pattern and commands attention. Non-reactivity shifts the power balance naturally, because control over your own responses is one of the strongest forms of influence in any relationship. When you stop contacting someone and maintain non-reactivity, you create a subtle but powerful dynamic. The absence of an immediate emotional response forces the other person to reflect, evaluate, and even reconsider their own behavior. They begin to notice your autonomy, your self-sufficiency, and the fact that you are not dependent on their attention for your well-being. This is why non-reactivity is so closely tied to respect. People respect those who do not give away their power through impulsive responses, because restraint communicates maturity, stability, and strength. When someone realizes that their actions cannot easily manipulate or unsettle you, it heightens their perception of your value and influence. Non-reactivity also encourages clarity in decision-making. When you respond under emotional pressure, decisions are often reactive rather than intentional. When you practice non-reactivity, you create mental space to assess the situation, weigh consequences, and act in alignment with your priorities. This intentionality further amplifies your power because every action becomes a statement of your self-respect and boundaries. People notice when your choices are deliberate and consistent, and they respond with attention and respect because your behavior demonstrates control over both yourself and the interaction. Consider how non-reactivity affects the emotional landscape of relationships. When someone is used to immediate responses, they may interpret your delayed reaction as indifference or distance. This is not a negative. It is the psychological effect of self-control. The brain is wired to react to uncertainty, and when your responses are measured, calm, and deliberate, it generates focus and curiosity. People start to evaluate why you are behaving differently, and in doing so, they recognize your independence and strength. Non-reactivity transforms ordinary interactions into powerful psychological statements, conveying more through silence and composure than through words or constant engagement. Non-reactivity also builds credibility. When your actions and responses are consistent, measured, and free from emotional turbulence, people know what to expect from you. This predictability, rooted in stability rather than passivity, creates trust and respect. Others are drawn to you not because you are predictable in a boring sense, but because you operate from a position of control and integrity. When you stop reacting impulsively, your presence becomes a stabilizing force, and people unconsciously assign higher value to your attention and interactions. This is why someone may react strongly when you withdraw communication. They sense that your composure and self-control make your presence significant and worthy of attention. Non-reactivity also fosters emotional independence. When your sense of self is intact, your moods are not dictated by others' behavior or approval. This is liberating and empowering because it removes the pressure to seek validation or chase attention. People are naturally drawn to emotional independence because it signals strength, stability, and maturity. The stronger your non-reactivity, the more powerful your presence becomes, because it communicates that your worth and your peace are not negotiable. This, in turn, provokes attention and respect from those around you, as they recognize that you are not easily influenced or diminished by external circumstances. Another dimension of non-reactivity is that it allows you to create boundaries without conflict. By remaining calm, composed, and intentional, you can withdraw attention or reduce availability without creating unnecessary drama. People notice this restraint because it is rare. Many individuals respond to discomfort with immediate emotional reactions. When you do the opposite, you demonstrate emotional mastery. This mastery is compelling, because it shows that you operate from a place of deliberate choice rather than reactive impulse. People respect power that is quiet and controlled because it requires discipline and self-awareness, qualities that are universally admired and difficult to challenge. Non-reactivity also increases your psychological leverage. When someone expects an emotional reaction and does not get one, they are forced to adjust their approach. They may reconsider assumptions, question their behavior, and become more attentive to your perspective. This is particularly relevant in relationships, where emotional manipulation or testing can be common. By remaining non-reactive, you prevent others from exerting influence over your emotions and, in doing so, establish a subtle but undeniable authority. Your absence or reduced engagement carries more weight because it is not accompanied by reactive emotion, it is intentional and controlled. Finally, non-reactivity enhances your long-term influence. Emotional impulses are fleeting, but deliberate responses grounded in self-control create lasting impressions. People remember how you made them feel, but they also remember how your presence or absence affected their perception. By cultivating non-reactivity, you ensure that your interactions are meaningful, memorable, and respected. People respond strongly not because you have changed dramatically, but because your calm, intentional, and composed approach communicates strength, independence, and integrity in a way that resonates deeply and commands attention. Consistency is one of the most powerful forces in human relationships, yet it is often underestimated. People underestimate it because it is quiet and subtle. It doesn't create immediate drama or instant reactions, but over time, consistency shapes perception, builds trust, and commands respect in a way that impulsive gestures or sporadic attention never can. When someone stops contacting you or begins setting boundaries, the consistent application of your actions, behaviors, and principles becomes a signal of value that others cannot ignore. Consistency is not about rigid routines or predictability in a boring sense. It is about aligning your words, actions, and presence with your internal values so that others recognize reliability, integrity, and strength. Over time, people learn to respect and even revere the consistency of someone who does not bend to pressure, who maintains self-respect, and who remains true to themselves regardless of external circumstances. Think about human behavior for a moment. People are naturally drawn to reliability. From childhood, we seek consistency in caregivers, friends, and partners because it creates a sense of safety, trust, and understanding. When someone behaves erratically, we feel uncertainty, anxiety, or frustration because we cannot predict what to expect. Conversely, when someone demonstrates consistent values, responses, and boundaries, the brain perceives them as stable, trustworthy, and worthy of attention. This is why consistency builds long-term respect. It signals that you are dependable and that your presence is not just fleeting or conditional, but grounded in genuine integrity. People notice this even if it is subtle. They recognize patterns over time, and their attention, admiration, and respect naturally grow. Consistency is especially powerful when combined with boundaries. Setting limits is not enough if they are sporadic or inconsistent. If one day you allow overextension and the next day you withdraw, people will struggle to understand your value or predict your behavior. But when boundaries are applied consistently, they communicate self-respect and intentionality. Others learn to adjust their behavior to align with your expectations, and this adjustment fosters a natural sense of respect. Consistency in boundaries signals that your time, energy, and attention are not trivial. They are valuable and non-negotiable, which in turn elevates your presence in the minds of others. Consistency also amplifies the effects of other psychological principles, such as scarcity, confidence, and non-reactivity. When someone experiences your consistent self-respect and intentional behavior over time, the combination of boundaries, calm composure, and confident presence creates a powerful feedback loop. Your scarcity feels intentional, your confidence feels unwavering, and your non-reactivity becomes a pattern that reinforces your strength. People do not just notice these qualities in isolation. They recognize the repeated, deliberate application of them, and this builds admiration, trust, and long-term respect that cannot be manufactured through occasional gestures. One of the most important aspects of consistency is authenticity. True consistency comes from aligning your actions with your values and priorities. It is not about behaving a certain way to manipulate others or gain favor. It is about living intentionally and acting from a place of self-respect. When people notice that your behavior is consistently rooted in authenticity, they recognize that you are not swayed by external pressures, expectations, or emotional manipulation. This creates a powerful dynamic in which your presence and attention are not easily taken for granted. People respond strongly because they understand that what they see is a genuine reflection of who you are, and authenticity combined with consistency is a magnetic force in human interaction. Consistency also cultivates trust. People respect those they can rely on, who behave predictably in terms of values and intentions. When you are consistent, others know what to expect from you, and this predictability fosters emotional security and admiration. Even when you stop contacting someone, if your behavior before and after has been consistent, they will interpret your absence as intentional and meaningful rather than random or impulsive. This perception enhances respect because it signals control, self-awareness, and deliberate choice. Trust built over time through consistent behavior is one of the strongest forms of social currency, and it commands attention and regard naturally. Another dimension of consistency is the demonstration of long-term reliability. Immediate reactions, spontaneous gestures, or occasional displays of presence may capture attention in the short term, but they do not build lasting respect. Respect is cultivated over time through repeated actions that reinforce your value, integrity, and self-respect. When someone notices that you maintain boundaries, respond with calmness, prioritize yourself, and act intentionally day after day, week after week, month after month, they internalize a profound recognition of your worth. Consistency is the silent force that transforms initial attraction or interest into deep admiration and long-term respect. Consistency also enhances your influence in relationships. When people can predict that you will act according to your values and boundaries, they adjust their behavior accordingly. They are more likely to honor your time, your attention, and your priorities. They are less likely to test your limits or attempt to manipulate you because your consistent behavior communicates clear expectations and reinforces your autonomy. Over time, this influence extends beyond individual interactions. It shapes how others perceive your overall presence and authority in their lives. Respect grows not because of fear or obligation, but because people recognize the reliability, stability, and integrity that your consistency embodies. Consistency works especially well when paired with patience. Building long-term respect is not about immediate reactions or quick wins, it is about sustained alignment with your values and principles. When you practice consistency, you are sending the message that your worth and your behavior are not conditional on immediate outcomes. You do not overreact to small disruptions. You do not compromise your boundaries for short-term gratification, and you do not seek validation from external sources. This patience communicates strength and self-respect, and over time, it cultivates deep, lasting respect from those who recognize the integrity behind your actions. Emotional consistency is another critical aspect. People notice when your moods, reactions, and energy levels are stable and predictable in terms of self-respect, rather than erratic or reactive to external pressures. Emotional consistency signals mastery over yourself and your environment, which naturally commands attention and admiration. When someone experiences your consistent emotional regulation, especially in situations where others might be reactive or impulsive, it creates a sense of psychological stability that draws them toward you and reinforces your influence. Finally, consistency ensures that respect is not fleeting or superficial. Momentary gestures, reactive attention, or sporadic displays of care may create temporary engagement, but they do not leave a lasting impression. Consistency transforms presence into significance. When people repeatedly experience your intentional actions, aligned behavior, and self-respect over time, they internalize a recognition of your value. This recognition is not based on whims, manipulation, or emotional highs. It is grounded in the reliability, integrity, and strength that you demonstrate consistently.